Hello, my name is Tim, the Tabletop Optimist, and I would like to welcome you to From Level 1 to Now, a series where I talk to interesting people in the TTRPG community, hoping to learn more about them and discuss how we can all make a positive impact on the community. Every interview, I will find out how they started out to where they are now. So let's find out some awesome things about some awesome people together. Before I introduce our guest, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, as it is the best way to support my channel. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by Mike Underwood, a game designer, author, streamer, and actual play producer. You can find Mike currently working on supplements for Daggerheart, a game they assisted in the development of, while also currently developing their own TTRPG based off of their Genrenauts book series titled Let's Go Steal an Ending. Mike also publishes fiction under the name Michael R. Underwood. You can find Mike on their socials with the links provided below, and on Twitch and Patreon posting their work and assisting players improve at Daggerheart. So let's figure out how they went from level 1 to now. Thank you so much for joining me from level 1 to now. How's the day going?
It's going pretty well. For full transparency, my dog had a pretty rough morning, but everybody is doing better now than we were earlier. So it's nice to have a day going in that direction.
No, that's good. Yeah, having to wake up, having to like start your day off like that is pretty rough. We have 3 cats, so I understand that.
Okay, yeah, we've got just the one, so I'm never in a position where we're outnumbered.
Yeah. No, that's probably what we should have done. But now we bought like 3 automatic litter boxes for 3 cats. But yeah, so a lot of this interview kind of focused on TTRPGs, and I was kind of curious, what kind of like, how did you start in the TTRPG space, whether it's public or private?
Yeah, so I got started pretty early. I was in 4th grade. It was a combined 4th and 5th grade at a private school in Brooklyn, New York. And I had already started collecting like X-Men trading cards and other things like that. You know, the trading cards would have like stats and things on them. And then some people I knew had D&D trading cards, right? This is like well, maybe not early 2nd edition, but 2nd edition. They had cards for the different kind of D&D settings. And then one of my classmates invited me to play D&D with them. All I remember from that session, you know, and I'm 8 or 9 or probably at this point, I had a character who was a barbarian. We were playing in Al-Qadim, and I had a dune buggy. My recollection is that Al-Qadim does not usually have dune buggy technology, but that is what stands out for me. And so I played 2nd edition D&D for some time, and then got into Palladium. And then after that, I kind of lived where I had a game store, and I was hanging out there, and then kind of stuff really got rolling for me.
Oh, well, yeah, I was gonna say, I think that's the youngest that I've had someone starting with TTRPGs before, and I mean, it's definitely something you've stuck with like your development in a lot of like TTRPGs and all the games that you've been working on.
Yeah, right. I got into TTRPGs before I really was putting any effort into learning to be a fiction writer. And so the two are kind of just inextricably linked in my head, and have been kind of the whole time. I don't know that I really understood the degree to which they were until I shifted into not doing fiction, but also doing game design.
Yeah, and I saw that with the kind of like looking into your bio, I saw like the Genrenauts thing. I think that's a really interesting concept of just kind of going from one genre to the next to make sure that they are that they are kind of like working out.
Yeah, right. Like one of my favorite films when I was a kid was Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
That's a good
And
one.
like the idea of genre conventions for cartoons is like a notable part of the film, right? That Roger can do extraordinary things, but only when it's funny. And another film that I think made a big impression on me as a kid was The Last Action Hero, which is another thing that made genre conventions explicit instead of implicit, right? I think growing up, a lot of folks, we implicitly learn genre conventions just by seeing how stories work. But then there were some of these films and things that pointed a spotlight at them instead of just letting them exist in the background. I think that planted the seed really early for me to try to think about genres and storytelling in that more direct structural way.
Yeah. So been playing since you've been about 8 or 9, around
Yep.
that kind of like time frame. If you could go back and tell your level 1 self something that you know now, what would you tell them?
That's a very good question. Like, there's too many answers. Is the real thing. I think in terms of like what I understand for the topic of your show, right, and the kind of tabletop optimist approach in general, I think the thing I might say is like learning to do this and being passionate about doing this doesn't have to only be fun. It
Mm-hmm.
is going to make you better at all of these other things that you want to do, right? And so that you can be confident that doing this is not just for fun or a waste of time, right? If I could tell 9-year-old me, any number of things, I'd be able to say like, oh, well, yeah, well, if you get real deep into TTRPGs and then you move out to Los Angeles around, 2013, 2014 and start working as an actor, right? Then I could be an actual play superstar. But in reality, there's other things that I could have been doing, right? Like could have gone into professional GMing kind of on the
Mm-hmm.
starting, the bleeding edge, right? There's so many different opportunities for using the skills that are developed in TTRPGs in a bunch of different ways, and taking seriously the idea that I could do that from an earlier age could have had any number of benefits, though, who knows what I would remember telling my 9-year-old self. So there's a bunch of different options, but I think the biggest one is to be to be proud and excited about this type of pursuit, not just for the fun that it gives, but because it has lots of other things that can connect to and benefit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the one thing that because I didn't get into it till I was about 28, and it's one of those things I wish I could get into it, could get into it younger, because it's like there's so much that GMing helps you with. It's like I feel like every GM has that book. I mean, you've wrote them, but every GM has like that book on there, like in the back of their mind, like, okay, well, I'm learning how people interact in this type of world, and that'll help me with writing. And also helps people with public speaking. So taking it more like having fun with it, but taking it seriously to the point where you're like, this is something, is
Yeah,
great advice to a younger person.
right. Because as I understand it, basically the the border or boundary between being a really good GM and being like a corporate meeting facilitator, right, is 80% branding, 20% MBA language, right? Like it seems like there's really not that much of a difference. And I've certainly found that my GMing skills makes me a much better facilitator in meetings and did in a more kind of buttoned up businessy world. In addition to like what you said in terms of the storytelling skills helping if a thing that you want to get to down the line is writing fiction. And for me, storytelling skills are storytelling skills, and then they can take a different form, and that every form requires some of its own particular approach to things, but to a certain extent storytelling is storytelling, and so you can get a lot of those reps in with people, and then that will give you a sense of what are other people's interior lives like to be able to write people who are less like yourself.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Kind of sticking around this this topic. This is one of my favorite questions I ask every person that comes across the interview. What is a moment in a game that you will always remember? And of course, with your extended history, there's probably quite a bit. But whatever one comes kind of front of mind, or if you want to talk about a couple of them.
Yeah, I one that really sticks with me that is mostly not about me doing anything cool. It's mostly a way for me to gas up a friend. So I'll go with that one because it's really fun. When I was in college, I played in a TTRPG group with folks who were, mostly almost a decade older,
Mm-hmm.
so they'd been to college and some to grad school. They'd played TTRPGs for quite some time. They'd refined and developed their taste in terms of what they liked in stories. And we were playing a Seventh Sea campaign. This is the first edition of Seventh Sea, not the more recent one. And there's a lot of things that I like about Seventh Sea. One of the big ones is that it's more explicit and like you can have a rival character, and that the rival, especially if you take certain types of backgrounds, they just totally outclass you at the beginning of the campaign, and you have to gain XP to be able to catch up. And so I played basically like a musketeer-ish character. There's a secret society in the setting, and so I played kind of an apprentice of that society, and then my friend also played an apprentice, and we had the same kind of like teacher mentor, kind of Jedi Padawan
Mm-hmm.
kind of a relationship. And we developed, talked about, we knew this character. We go into session one, and by the end of session one, the GM has killed this mentor. And we've had almost no time with the character, but because of having this mentor be shared between two player characters, and because of the way that the GM had set up the situation to kind of bring about the doom and death of this character in front of my character and this other PC, it just meant that the campaign started with such momentum and emotional intensity that it gave us an incredible kind of baseline or foundation to build upon, right? That we were able to reach such emotional intensity and commitment and engagement with the story and the characters and what they care about really early on because of the way that this GM had set things up. So, Jack Norris, if you're listening, you did a great job with that campaign. Thank you.
With the years that you've kind of been playing TTRPGs, you've also been a lot of years of developing TTRPGs. And now I want to kind of ask about your your game. Sorry, I want to ask about your game design career.
Yeah.
With the years of experience playing, what made you want to make that jump over to the designing of the games?
Yeah. In the kind of like 2015, 2016, I got back into being more like hands-on and investigating like what was going on in the world of TTRPGs after a few years where we moved more frequently, right? I lived in Indiana in 2012, and then we moved. The we at the time was my then girlfriend, now wife. Right, we moved from Indiana to uh, to Queens for a job for me, and then from Queens to Baltimore for a job for her 7 months later. And then we're in Baltimore and we're kind of, trying to make new friends and settle in and get all that kind of stuff there. And so there was maybe 3 or so years when I just wasn't engaging much with TTRPGs. I'd,
Mm-hmm.
follow some Kickstarters and listen to a couple of podcasts. But what really got me back in was learning about and then starting to really dig into the Power by the Apocalypse design tradition. So, Apocalypse World, Monster of the Week, and things like that. Because in college, I'd been very much a narrative game, story game um, focused person. And that was a lot of what I was working on or working with when I was doing my academic work in grad school. And so we have this game style that is more up my alley, and I'm able to be playing these games as I'm working on my fiction. And this takes a little bit longer, so I'll try to do the like not super long version of the story. Um, I see the Blades in the Dark Kickstarter, already knowing of John Harper's work from seeing them in actual play and knowing about Lady Blackbird. And Blades in the Dark, with the kind of heist structure and flashbacks, I thought could be a really interesting game system to use for one of my books, but not the one that I ended up developing into a Forge in the Dark RPG. It was a different thing. And then as I was kind of engaging with that system more and kind of getting familiar with it, I realized that it would be an even better fit for the Genrenauts series. That is the kind of interdimensional story heists, to kind of give a little context for your listeners and viewers. And because it was already heist oriented, the game system that is heist oriented made a really nice fit. And then what I was able to do is take a long-term love and interest in TTRPGs in terms of thematic design and why and how mechanical choices inform the kinds of stories that you get to tell. And coming in with a background as a novelist, that gave me a lot of visibility, and I think made it much easier for me to wrap my head around and begin to kind of engage with and kind of tinker mechanically. Plus, Harper is a very consciously transparent designer, building on a design tradition from Vincent and Meguey Baker as the kind of co-creators of Power by the Apocalypse, right? First with Apocalypse World, which is credited to Vincent in first edition and then to both of them in second. There's this tradition of transparent design, which to me felt like it was game design that was teaching you how this game works and how to design games. And so there were these layers of work being rendered in a way that felt like it was inviting me in, and it made it easier for me to feel like I could dive really far into the mechanical design and to think about how mechanics and theme and story are all interconnecting without feeling like I needed to be given separate permission,
Mm-hmm.
which is something I think I felt subconsciously earlier on when I was studying TTRPGs and studying game design, but not actively doing game design above and beyond, the amount of game design that almost any GM will do in terms of like homebrew or home rules, like, house rules and things like that. So it was some things happening in my life and the series that I loved that was a great fit for a game that was in a design tradition that had a sense of approachability and empowering players to become designers. So that when I dove into my first game design project as a full length, multi hundred page type TTRPG, while that was very silly to a certain extent, I had the foundation of the Blades SRD that Harper provided, and I had a lot of experience as a writer. And I didn't get in my own way to say, oh, well, that's silly. You can't do this. You have to start small. Instead, I jumped in. I tried to figure out as much as I could. And then I brought stuff to the table to play and test. And once I was in that cycle of designing and testing and iterating, it was able to kind of gather momentum and get me going. And then several years later, and a few fun detours, here I am.
No, I love that. It's like it's like something that it's an experience that we can all kind of share is when you've developed something and you love it, and then you're playing a game, and then you're like two things that you've never expected to kind of like cross that they do. And it's just like, it's such a natural like creation of a game where it's not like you're trying to build the game around something that already exists, where you're looking at it, you're like, holy crap, this is what I'm looking for. Like, how did I not know that these two would just go so well together until I started playing them?
Yeah, and I think part of what made it easy to adapt Genrenauts into what is now Let's Go Steal an Ending, the Genrenauts RPG, because it's a little bit easier of a title. Because for Genrenauts, somebody has to understand the linguistic construction of how the word astronaut works. And so that's a little bit involved. I think because Leverage and the heist stories that Leverage builds on was already in the set of touchstones for Blades,
Mm-hmm.
right? It meant that this part is really, really straightforward and can go one to one. And that gives me latitude to then do something else that's much more wild, right? The idea of a game that can emulate any number of different genres and the idea that you're doing heists not of individual things, but of a story. Right?
Mhm.
It's like, okay, well, the difficulty over here is tuned way down so that if the difficulty over here is high, it's not overwhelming. And that was really was really freeing, and it then made it easier to move forward and find those like peanut butter and chocolate kinds of moments of like, oh, this works even better than I thought.
Yeah. With the games that you've kind of assisted in developing or developed yourself, do you know if there's like a common theme that you always kind of like put in all of your games? Like if somebody was playing a game and they played like a few of your different types of games, if they see it without knowing it was made by you, would they be like, oh yeah, that's a Mike Underwood? It's like I could tell.
Yeah, I think the biggest like running theme in my like creator owned work, because the stuff that I've done freelance is much more like in service of someone else's vision,
Mhm.
which is totally fine, right? It's just a different way of working. In my own stuff, I think there is a pronounced attention to and playfulness with genre conventions and the expectations that they create,
Mhm.
because right, I've got the Genrenauts RPG. The other game that I've released is a one-page science fiction pastiche game. The only logical solution is hijinks, which
Great title, by
is
the way.
largely riffing. Thank you. Largely riffing on the Strange New Worlds episode where Spock and T'Pol switch bodies, right? And it's the idea of very serious people having to do very silly things, right? That and the juxtaposition, and there's a little bit of like farce element to it, and wanting to engage with a genre that I love a lot, right? That type of
Mhm.
kind of social science fiction adventure in the vein of Star Trek, but then bringing my own sense of humor to it and my ideas and thoughts about and the way that I'm always thinking about stories in terms of like a structure and thematic standpoint, where it's not just here is the genre that this is, but what are stories of this type tending to do? What cultural flows or intersections do they tend to operate along, right? The idea that superheroes for a lot of people are modern mythology, and the idea that cyberpunk reflects contemporary anxieties about potential future, like lived realities. And of course, now we live in a cyberpunk world. It's just a lot less fun than some of the visions from the 80s and 90s. And then for Star Trek, right, it's this idea that you can take a sociological or a political or a cultural question or idea and wrap it in just enough of a fictional framing that you get a little bit of a remove, and then you can engage with it. So it's that like a playful engagement with an awareness of genre on like a critical level, not like
Mhm.
critical of it, but critical like critical theory or literary criticism.
Right now, you are focusing on developing kind of like a lot of your own supplementals for Daggerheart using the CGL. With your Bastion of Hope campaign frame,
Mhm.
the different environments, classes, and adversaries, uh, what is kind of like your inspiration for these creations?
Yeah, I think on a like really fundamental level, um I really love the game of
Hmm.
Daggerheart, right? I did that particular work on it in terms of the credits that are listed. And when I saw that there was going to be an opportunity to create using like the grammar and the structure of Daggerheart for myself without needing to kind of be hired again by Darrington and do work in that way, I was very happy because I'd um, I developed a lot of like opinions and perspectives on the game by like running it throughout the beta and sharing the beta version with friends, right? Just like as somebody who was familiar with the game in like that more public sphere. And now the game is out and I can use the CGL, and Bastion is the thing that I'm working on that is the most developed. I wrote everything down today a little bit in preparation for this call, and realized that I have basically 6 creator-owned projects that are somewhat started for Daggerheart, 3 potential collaborations, and then 1 other like freelance thing that may or may not happen. Uh, and so I'm just engaging with the game in all of these different ways. And the things that are, I think, most interesting to me about it are using the campaign frame structure to provide different toolkits for different tables and trying to push the game above and beyond where it already is, right? The core book is the foundation. And then with the CGL and with other supplements, and the Darrington side of that is all kind of at their discretion. On the creator side, right, we can try and push the game in any number of ways that we want to. And so, right, one of the projects that I've started is much more like a structural departure, right, adding on like a big interesting thing to Daggerheart. Bastion is almost in the other direction where I'm trying to stick really closely to the structure of campaign frames as laid out in the book, using the CGL and the Witherwild frame as the example in the SRD. What I'm seeing from other creators is a lot of folks who are making complexity 3, 4, and then 5, which is above and beyond the complexity 4 of Colossus of the Drylands, right? Taking Daggerheart and pushing it into like really notably other genres and settings. And what I'm trying to do with Bastion of Hope is create a really interesting and exciting setting that is still very strongly epic fantasy, right? Heroic fantasy.
Yeah.
It just happens to be revolutionary heroic fantasy, right? Anti-authoritarian heroic fantasy, where I'm trying to set up a setting, right? Create a setting that is exciting and interesting and has a cool catch, right? You're fighting dragons, you're fighting big necromancers, like give it a hook while not making it so unfamiliar that folks can't kind of bring a lot of the core elements that they're excited about in epic fantasy or heroic fantasy to that setting, where I'm just like, okay, I'm going to give you just enough structure and inspiration and some tools, and then you can go and like do the Daggerheart thing. Because, right, you can play Motherboard and you're playing Daggerheart, but you're playing Daggerheart in this particular way, and the frames are meant to be the structure that will let you, or the frames as I see them, will let you play the game in all of these different ways. And I had already been developing the Bastion setting because of, my own reaction to and thoughts about kind of international politics, in terms of seeing the rise of like the resurgence of authoritarianism and thinking about what does it take to build community? What does it take for a people, a country, a set of communities to stand against, act against a top-down authoritarian kind of structure? And here, kind of like what I was saying with Star Trek, using the lens of fantasy, the lens of fiction, to create a like an imaginary creative playground in which people can engage with a lot of those questions. So a big thing I want to do in Bastion and set people up to be able to do is the elements that are required in building a revolutionary coalition, developing a country now that you're in a position to be able to kind of have independence and be able to direct yourself, right? Take a lot of these questions and elements that are key to and have been a big deal in kind of world history across various revolutionary movements, and kind of after a revolutionary movement is successful, and all the dangers that can come from that. Because what I see is, I've seen a lot in fantasy stories that are, we have a big bad and we will fight them. And over the course of the whole series, you fight the big bad, and then it ends when the big bad has been defeated. And there's a lot fewer stories that are, okay, now what? Right? We've done this thing, but now what? We've overthrown the big bad, but there's these 5 other big bads, and the mere existence of one free country undermines the propaganda work that all of these other overlords are doing. So they want to collapse in and destroy you, in the same way that global neoliberal and conservative democracies come together to annihilate socialist and communist revolutionary groups during or after any kind of successful movement building that they do, right? And so this is the fantasy version of that, right? Surprise, this, like, I'm pulled back the curtain. It shouldn't be too hard to read, but like that's ultimately what I'm getting at, and the thing that makes me most excited about this campaign frame.
Like you said, in multiple games, including my own. I've only ran one long form campaign where it's like you're going against this king and then you knock the king down, but then that's where the campaign ended. But it's like with going beyond that, you not only get that massive moment, you're like where you do get to fight the big bad, but how does this affect going forward? It's like typically striking down like the big bad is like that's it, you did a good job, everybody's happy. Maybe we'll jump 10 years down the road and see how everything went to after that, but still being in that campaign, you're just like, okay, well, now how do we establish a type of government that works for people, and what do these other countries want to do about that? Like if you are, yeah.
Well, like from a story standpoint, having one big bad that you can defeat where your main character has an emotionally intense relationship with the big bad, and so the internal conflict and the interpersonal conflict and the big external political conflict are all in sync and they're aligned, and kind of the result of one creates a domino effect and impacts the result of all the other ones, right? That's really clean, it's really efficient. Real life is not super clean or efficient, and right, there's a lot of messiness, and there is art that is engaging with that, right? I think the TV show Andor and then some of these other more recent Star Wars projects have engaged more directly with the realities of what regime change looks like, right? That the Republic becoming the Empire is not an overnight thing. It was already on the way to become the Empire before Palpatine declares himself Emperor, right? A lot of the same people are still in the Senate under the Empire versus the Republic. And then later on, we see that people from the Empire get folded into the new Republic, right? And that you can change some stuff at the top, but a lot of what makes a system go is all these bureaucrats, is the ideologies that people have internalized, right? A lot of this other stuff that is much more ground level. It is community oriented, and it's not so easy to just flip a switch.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be really interesting, but it is a different enough type of storytelling that it seems like that's a big part of why it's much less common, and because it's messier. And so can I jump into this setup and prepare people to be able to interrogate and explore some of that messiness in a way that is intelligible, right? We still have a heroic fantasy gloss on it, but then they're able to maybe play and engage in some ways that are new.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of going off of that, it's like authoritarians don't like seeing other authoritarians lose power. And so that's, I think that is, like we said, with like multiple big bads or multiple like after everything, that is something that's very interesting that I haven't seen that many people contemplate or think about when it comes to like their own campaigns. It's like what happens after the fact.
Yeah, and there's been other art that kind of starts with the revolution,
Mm.
and some of those pieces are varying degrees of inspiration for my work. But for a Daggerheart campaign frame, I wanted to like bring bring this kind of idea and try to figure out where is that balance point, right? How much do I need to provide for people? Because the thing that I'm seeing from folks in Daggerheart playing communities, right, and amongst various GMs, is some folks are coming from 5e, some are not, but there is a lot of hunger for longer form adventure modules,
Mm-hmm.
and for Daggerheart specific or Daggerheart compatible in this, in reality, supplemental setting materials. And I'm hoping that the campaign frame is the beginning of a larger product line where I figure out how I can support people at the varying levels and in the different ways that they want, while kind of building something where it's easier to kind of like have everything go together, because I have enough different wild projects and ideas anyway. Having at least one set of things that's easy to organize with one another would be a good idea.
Since you've been doing this for so long, you do have like a lot of knowledge in the game development field. Um, what advice do you have for people who are wanting to start with like game development?
Yeah, so my road into kind of game design, going from this is a thing I do on the side, more focusing on my fiction, to this is the main thing that I do. I accept that the trajectory I've had is very strange. And so, speaking from my own experience, the the way that I can generalize what worked for me was to be engaged with and be curious about things that are happening in the TTRPG world, especially in the design styles, trends, or genres that you're most interested in, and figure out where you can add to the conversations that you're really excited about, right? To not just watch the YouTubers that are talking about the game that you're excited about. Where can you, you know, try to add interesting questions or comments that build the conversation on those videos? Are there discords you can join? Are there conversations on Blue Sky? Are there, you know, meetups at conventions that trying to add value, in a kind of like a capitalist way, like add value
Yeah.
to conversations and um, like design conventions and design like activities, that the best way to get work is to do work.
Mhm.
And it's hard to get involved with a scene if you are not it's hard to get work in a scene if you're not already involved in that scene in whatever ways you can be on your own, right? Self-publishing your own work, having a blog about the genre or the type of games that you like, reviewing games, having a podcast
Mhm.
where you talk to people who are in that space, right? Being engaged in the conversations that you want to kind of lead to professional work, or that you want to be a professional within, is going to be more likely to set you up to have the relationships that might be able to create that, is more likely to help you build um, people believing or kind of investing in you some sense of authority, right? This person has been in these conversations and has had a blog about the OSR for however many years. And so when somebody does a game jam, or when there's a call, people will tend to go to the folks that they already know of, they already have relationships with. And so that's just my best advice for dealing with the world as it is, and providing a framework that is at least some degree empowering. The ultimate challenge is that unless you're fully self-publishing the whole way through, at some point you need somebody else to say yes when you've pitched them, or to reach out to you.
Mhm.
And starting by doing your own thing is probably the best way that you can set yourself up for success. But as it was for me, sometimes luck is still going to be an irreducible factor, but you can give yourself better chances by continuing to be engaged.
No, and that's as someone who grew up during like the rise of social media, I've been terrible with it. I am not great at like commenting on people's stuff. I'm not great at posting my own stuff or anything like that. And that's I think it's a lesson that a lot of people find difficult to learn, is that in order to be part of a community, it sounds simple, but in order to be part of a community, you must be part of the community. You must interact with other people, because that's how you get remembered. That's how you get noticed. And don't do it just for like reasons, of course, to maybe get some benefit from them at a later date. But it's also like you feel better when you're interacting with the community, and when people have that, and when people have that kind of trust based on what you kind of interact based on interactions with you, it's easier for them to be like, oh, well, they got like a one pager. Let me check it out, see what it's like.
Yeah, and the it's fun. It's funny to me because the YouTube stuff that I've done for kind of talking about Daggerheart and making Daggerheart compatible stuff took off so quickly because there was this excitement about the game.
Hmm.
Um, I found myself then in a position to put into use advice that I had gotten from a friend basically a decade ago, because he was already kind of building a platform as a YouTuber at that time and is now a full-time YouTuber, like talking about like visiting and like basically tourism to and living in Paris as an American who's now has now gotten French citizenship. And like the thing that he said was like, I spend an hour a day going through and responding to comments because he was already at that point where the volume was there. And to me, in 2015, I was like, that's preposterous. I'll never be in a position, where I have to do that. And I don't spend an hour a day going through comments on, stuff on my YouTube. But the fact that he articulated as a thing that you just have to commit to and take seriously set me up to be able to respond to that kind of big influx of response that I was getting, treating this as an important part of the work, right? Not just to respond to each person kind of as a person and to, take questions and things in good faith and kind of treat this as part of the process, but that I knew from how he'd done his stuff that this was in fact also a growth strategy,
Hmm.
right? And so it's like it's the way to have your cake and eat it too, right? Not only is this good for your growth, but it is a way to also build up connections and build up other people, right? Elevating good questions so that other people then kind of are able to note and acknowledge, oh, this person has interesting things to ask and say inside this conversation. And then now we're building digital communities in terms of like discourse communities about the game or subsections in the game and seeing people on the Reddit refer to YouTube. And like that's how everything comes together.
Yeah, and that was one of the biggest pleasant shockers of doing from level one to now. Is at first my whole goal was like I've seen a lot of very awesome people online talk about TTRPGs. There are a lot of vocal people that are very loud about TTRPGs that I don't want to highlight because of the way they talk. But it's like I got to meet people that I think are very cool. And it is not too often that you get to have like a half an hour to an hour long conversation with someone and just talking about something you love and like showing people like there are a lot of amazing people in this community and I feel like people should know about them. That was one thing I wasn't even anticipating. I was just like I wanted to bring up people that I wanted to talk about and talk to about TTRPGs, but I didn't also think that it's like I'm building that connection with people. And even if it's like that 1 hour conversation, it's still that 1 hour conversation I got to have with a person, even if I don't get to interact with people like later on.
Yeah, right. Doing an interview show like this is a great way of becoming a part of, a creative or a professional community or whatever, right? Because you get the benefit of whatever you learn from the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
You get to develop your own ability to kind of shape and articulate your thoughts about and show your curiosity within an area, but you're also meeting people. There's a very strong degree to which you are providing a service, right? You're sharing your platform or creating a platform for people to then be able to, show off what they know or kind of become more known by audiences. But then you're also building individual human relationships,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you do this show, and then if you go to PAX Unplugged and go to some, TTRPG party, now there's a good chance that like a half dozen people or something like that, right? So I've been beneficiary of that when I was doing the show Speculate, when it was an interview show, and then to some degree when it was actual play because it was still meeting people. But you're already doing the work, and you and then I have articulated a lot of the benefits there. So it's just it's a great thing. Honestly, I really love interview shows. Would love to see more of them.
The TTRPG community is not short of having a ton of amazing people that are in front of the camera, behind the camera, or just playing at their table. These people like to interact, they like to talk about their love for TTRPGs. But there are quite a few people who like to add negativity to not only TTRPGs, but probably across social media as well. Um, when you see people who are negative getting more attention, it can stop a lot of people from wanting to join the TTRPG community. What can we do to make the TTRPG space kind of more accepting and more kind of like diverse of people to make to make the space better?
Yeah, and right, this is a great question because there's almost an infinite number of answers.
Mhm.
And I think the one that I want to highlight right now is uh, like super imminent. Um, I don't know how long, between editing and release this will be, but folks that have been paying attention to the TTRPG world and are really online will know that a conservative group out of Australia has been pressuring payment processors to get retailers to drop a variety of creative works, right? The big stories we've been hearing are about Steam and about itch.io. What I want to encourage listeners and viewers to do is to go to itch.io and other places where you find TTRPGs and look for those messy personal works, especially by trans creators, other queer creators, creators who are in or have been in the world of sex work, right? The stuff that the bigots want to ban needs our support the most right now because censorship targets marginalized communities first. And unless broader communities rally to those folks who are at the very edge of the margins, who are the easier targets, then it becomes a snowball, right? And this is how fascism operates. And so we can learn about new games that are exciting. We can connect with designers who are innovating and working in cool, really personal and specific ways. And we can create a bulwark of positivity and support to stand against efforts to try to silence the voices of people who are on the margins.
No, that's great. No, I it's like you said, like the easiest voices are typically the ones to be like attacked first. It's like there are a lot of people like, and I'm not trying to like target specific people, but there are a lot of straight white men who do develop these types of games who are never going to be feeling this. And it's like we want to support everyone who's doing what they can to make the TTRPG community better. But there are a lot of people who are going to be attacked just because of who they are, even before they even open a page of their book. And
Yeah, and there is ha- having a right for a creator of color, having a white person like uh, get really excited about and promote their work will do things that other creators of color that are already in community with that original creator cannot do because of a bunch of overlapping implicit systems. And so right, places where you can consciously try to utilize the privilege that you have in whatever like position that you're in, that can really open doors for people because if you as the person who's trying to be curious and compassionate and building positivity, if you are the one who is stepping outside your comfort zone and then bringing back work that excites you to kind of whatever majority position communities you're in, that can do a lot.
definitely. But yeah, that was my final question. Wanted to ask, where can we find you? What are you working on that you can talk about? That or
Yeah.
yeah,
So I am mostly on Blue Sky these days. So that's at mikeRunderwood.bsky.social. My Patreon is patreon.com/Michael R. Underwood. And I stream on Twitch, but then it shows up in YouTube and it's easier to find stuff on YouTube. So that's youtube.com/at Mike Underwood. My Patreon has all of the new Daggerheart compatible material that I'm working on. If you sign up as a paid subscriber at $3 USD or more, you get access to a lot of work in progress. stuff as I'm developing it. You'll see kind of rough drafts. And then as I get things finished, they're going to become published at the kind of retail level. And so there's different levels depending on, where your budget is. I know, economically times are tough for a lot of people. And so the videos that I do are going to, all the stream stuff is going to stay free. So the social and the streaming and the Patreon kind of all go together. So whichever one of those excites you, you can go there. Go to the YouTube. I have a bunch of free videos. As you may be able to tell from this interview, I can go on when I get excited. But if you want big, meaty ruminations and discussions of my perspective on Daggerheart and TTRPGs more broadly, you can go there.
All right, and I will be posting the links down below so that way you can see all those down at the top of the description. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me, and it was really nice talking to you. Glad after months of kind of like liking or commenting on each other's posts, we were able to do this as close to face to face as we could.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I'm glad that we got to chat.
Before I go, I want to once again thank Mike for joining me. Make sure to follow them on their socials with the links provided below. Please like and subscribe to make sure you don't miss out on any future interviews and videos I upload. I want to thank you for watching, remind you to keep that glass half full, and have a great next game. Bye.